Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl has turned from just a dream for many people out there to literally being a reality in just 7 days. From someone who was introduced to the Stalker franchise back in 2009 when my cousin showed me the immersive world of Call of Pripyat, it has grown my love for not only the franchise of Stalker, but my love for survival games as a whole, as well as my now deep interest into Soviet-era history, and my even deeper fascination with the Chernobyl exclusion zone. To say that I am excited for Stalker 2 might just be an understatement, and so are a lot of you guys as well. 10 to 15 years has been a hell of a long time coming for a game which has so much prestige in the survival shooter genre. I mean, you can thank Stalker for a lot of the concepts of survival games that you are playing right now. I get a lot of questions when it comes to Stalker and this new upcoming Stalker 2, and most commonly they are, how do I prepare for Stalker 2, what do I need to know about the previous Stalkers, and will I understand what's going on when I play Stalker 2 if I haven't played the first 3 games? Well, that's pretty much where this video comes in. Hopefully, in the most condensed way I can, I will be discussing all of these topics with you to give you all the necessary things that you need to know for when this game releases in just a week's time. And just to note that this video will include story summaries from the previous titles, so please bear in mind that although the games are a decade old, you may still have story-related spoilers sprinkled in here and there. Firstly, to answer the main question of will you know what's going on in Stalker 2 if you haven't played the previous titles, the short answer is yes, for the most part. If you were going to go in without playing any of the previous titles and stop watching this video from this point onwards, then yes, you are more than likely to know what's going on in Stalker 2. Stalker games have always been very story-driven. And if you have played the originals, you'll know that each of the games play out in, yes, an interconnected overarching storyline, but each of them have their own protagonists and their own stories to tell. So whilst having an understanding of the lore of the games will help, you can easily play them separately and still pick up the story as you go. Stalker 2 will be no different to the previous titles in that regard, especially when the franchise has been vacant for so long. The story of Heart of Chernobyl will be based around a new protagonist, Skiff. He is an illegal scavenger inside of the zone, and whilst there will be returning characters in this storyline, the story of Skiff is completely new to all of us. Additionally, the developers have crafted Stalker 2 to be accessible to new players with enough context to understand the game's world and mechanics. The game features intuitive tutorials through environmental storytelling, much like the previous games, like talking to hundreds of walking stalkers roaming the landscape, each with their own stories to tell, which will also include subtle but mostly important clues on navigation and different side objectives. This allows players to naturally immerse themselves without needing any prior knowledge. For example, you might go speak to an NPC who is walking around a town who tells you about a blocked route in the next town over. It's overrun by pseudo-dogs, and he might give you different hints on how to combat them during the dialogue. Remember though, not all conversations in the games are going to be story related. You could just end up walking around town and having friendly chats to the whole town for about 20 minutes. The main thing about playing older titles and what it will do for you is give you a deeper understanding of the lore and the factions hidden throughout the game, which may help with Stalker 2 as it is a very decision-focused game, meaning siding with different groups will change the outcome of your ending. And who knows, maybe after playing the older titles you might have a favourite faction, or just realise that the monolith are an absolute pain in the ass and you will side with anyone but them. Now, let's talk about the previous titles to give you a rough summary of the stories, so if you do want a little refresher before you get started, then that is available to you, and if you haven't played the games but just want a brief summary of the previous, then you're welcome. So, as mentioned before, there are 3 titles in the Stalker franchise so far, with Stalker 2 being the 4th. The first game, Shadow of Chernobyl, is our first deep dive into the zone. In Shadow of Chernobyl, players will immerse themselves in their first true experience into the dark, immersive world of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, years after a second catastrophic explosion. Now, a lot of people that play the game for the first time think that this game is just a fictionalized realization of the original 1986 nuclear disaster in Chernobyl that happened in real life. This is not the case. It is based on a second one that happened completely fictional in 2006. The game kicks off with your character, known as the Marked One, waking up with absolutely no memory. He's basically suffering with amnesia, but he's got a cryptic note prompting him to kill a man named Strelok. Throughout the game, you'll encounter memorable characters that return in future games, like Sidorovich, which is basically a trader who provides you a lot of the missions and essential supplies throughout the game. You got Wolf, who's basically a seasoned stalker, and he gives you guidance around the zone and assistance where you need it. And Doctor, which is basically a guy that gives you clues to your past as you go. Really interesting, really builds character. And then on top of that, you've got the initial gameplay mechanics, which are very survival-based, exploration, and all that sort of stuff in an open world, which at that time wasn't really done. It was quite ambitious. Now, not to say that the gun mechanics, for example, were any good at all. It felt like recoil was there, but not in the way that you would expect. I considered it personally quite high, but not as in your gun would bounce up and down like typical recoil in modern games. The recoil wasn't there in terms of that. The gun stayed perfectly stationary, but the difference is your bullet spread was quite wide. So you could be aiming 10 feet away from an enemy and shooting around them rather than at them. Now, this did get improved in future games, but it's definitely something that other players were definitely compensating with by over-aiming with their bullet drop, so a headshot won't land in the chest area, for example, and some things like that. And you've got to really pay attention to the different guns you're using as well, which I suppose was a feature at the time, but playing it back nowadays, it doesn't feel as good. But that's by the by. It was a very good starting point for a survival-based game like this. And you had to manage your inventory, balance your weapons, armor, and medical supplies, and even artifacts that you pick up along the way. Artifacts can be found inside of the Anomaly fields. You see these different events around the world, and different anomalies do different things. Some of them could be quite harmless, others could be like volcanoes of fire going off in the air. But all of the artifacts, after finding them, can give you different perks like health regeneration, radiation resistance, stamina boost, but they often come with negative effects as well, like increased blood loss or all of these other things. They are quite unique and quite interesting to know about. On top of all of this, you encounter tons of different factions along the way, each with their own agenda inside of the zone. One of them is Duty, who are a paramilitary faction and have a really strict hierarchical structure, and their main goal is to basically protect the world from the dangers of the zone by containing and destroying the anomalies and the mutants within it. They believe the zone is a threat to humanity and must be eradicated, where on the complete opposite end of the spectrum is freedom, and they advocate for the exploration and study of the zone, and they believe the zone's secrets should be accessible to everyone, and oppose the militaristic approach of Duty, and they often fight a lot, as you will see in the future titles that we talk about. The main thing about the game's combat system, though, is it's realistic and challenging, requiring a lot of tactical thinking and quite precise aiming, which, as I mentioned earlier, isn't easiest in Shadow of Chernobyl because it is quite annoying to aim when looking back, but it held up well at the time. But you've also got to encounter like environmental hazards as well, like radiation, toxic gases, and the anomalies that I mentioned earlier. So it makes it a lot harder to just go from point A to point B because you don't know what's in your way. As you progress deeper through the story, you find different revelations like the common consciousness, or most commonly known as sea consciousness, or even the wish granter. All of these different things appear in different endings, and I won't go into too much detail about the actual endings themselves, but that is a brief overview on what you're going to be expecting in the game, and if you did want to play it, it's literally like £10 on Steam, and it's well worth it. The second game in the franchise is actually a prequel and considered by many players of Stalker as sort of like a DLC but not type of game. It can be completed in basically a day of game time. It's not as detailed, but at the same time it does have a ton of recurring characters, a lot of different callbacks to Shadow of Chernobyl. Like I say, it's a prequel to the first game, so you got them characters and it builds on the lore quite heavily. At the same time though, I wouldn't say that you must play Shadow of Chernobyl to understand Clear Sky. There are a lot of callbacks to the previous games, but you can pick it up by yourself just by playing Clear Sky if you wanted to. And as I said, it's a lot shorter, so you can pick up these clues that are given along the way quite easily. We play in this game as a character named Scar. He's a seasoned mercenary who has ventured into the zone, which we find out in the game he has some resistances to things that we find in there. The resistances I'm talking about are emissions, and you encounter these twice in Shadow of Chernobyl, and they are both scripted events. In Clear Sky, these happen a lot more frequently, and these are basically big old blowouts. You can encounter these all the time when venturing into new locations in Clear Sky. They happen quite a bit. You'll know when you see them because they're basically like large thunderclaps in the distance. The sky can turn red and you'll get alerts on your PDA. And all of your objectives, if you're completing a mission, will change. Your secondary objectives will change to finding shelter. They're quite dangerous, but a big part of the second game especially, and because they are unscripted and just happen randomly throughout gameplay, it gives your character an extra thing to watch out for whilst you're playing, again playing on the immersion factor of just dropping everything you're doing to find shelter and safety. He is caught in a brewing conflict among the zone's factions, and on top of that, the game introduces a brand new faction called Clear Sky. They want to basically uncover all the secrets behind the zone's creation and all of its power. But the gameplay in Clear Sky is very similar, but it's just built on top of what we already had as a baseline. It adds new elements and also refines existing ones. Players need to navigate between factional warfare, aligning with or opposing to various groups such as Duty, Freedom, and Clear Sky. Duty and Freedom, I mentioned earlier, they're always fighting, but you actually get to pick to side with one of them, and that's where replayability comes in. Aligning with these do affect the storyline and the player's experience with the different factions, offering unique quests, equipment, and story outcomes. Scar's journey is marked by intense firefights, stealth missions, and artifact hunting, whilst managing the ever-present threats of radiation and anomalies and all that fun stuff that you get in the zone. The game's AI is also more sophisticated, with enemies employing tactics like flanking and using cover, making combat encounters more challenging and engaging. And I will talk about AI and all that sort of stuff later in this video, because what they have done with the AI in the Stalker franchise is quite incredible for the time of the release. Now, our third and final game in the current trilogy is Call of Pripyat. This continues the story that have played out in previous games and is no longer a prequel. It is a continuation, and you play as a different protagonist again. You play as Major Alexander Degtyarev, and he is a former stalker but then turned government agent. He works for the Security Service of Ukraine, also known as the USS. And he's tasked with finding and investigating the disappearance of 5 military helicopters. That actually takes twists and turns and all that along the way, as you would expect, but your whole goal is to venture into the zone's most dangerous and iconic locations like Pripyat, Zaton, and all of those fun places that give you the creeps, even if you play it as many times as I have. Along the way, you encounter many more characters like Sokolov and Noah and a whole host of other stalkers, each with their own stories and agendas. The gameplay in Call of Pripyat is a lot more polished and a lot more open world compared to the previous games. You've got a lot more freedom to explore as you are finding these helicopters after all. You have to gather intelligence along the way and complete missions to survive in the harsh environment. And the game introduces a new refined inventory system, even more improved AI, and an even better realistic health and stamina system. The storyline delves into the mysteries behind the failed military operation and the broader implications of the zone's future. Players uncover hidden truths, confront powerful enemies, and navigate the world through danger and intrigue. Call of Pripyat enhances the series' core mechanics with even better graphics and a better shooting system. For the love of me, it was much easier to fight in that game than it was to fight in the first, and it's a lot more coherent in the narrative. And this is where GSC, the developers of Stalker, took the turn to make the game a stronger focus on player choice and their consequence. In this game, your actions have a lot more impact compared to the previous two, and I'm excited to see where they develop it further into Stalker 2 when it releases next week. Those summaries of these games are extremely brief, and with the game's replayability and the ability to side with multiple factions throughout the story, you can get multiple different endings as you play. One thing I mentioned in the summaries was a AI system. The AI system that I keep mentioning is called A-Life, also known as artificial life, and they use this to further immerse you in the world of Stalker. And it's also what makes Stalker such an interesting game to play over and over, because nobody will get the same interactions and not story scripted events. A-Life controls the behaviour of any NPCs and wildlife in the zone. This means that NPCs in a certain radius around you will interact in their own way. They will run their own routes, their own routines, they will have their own get out of bed times and go to bed times, all these sorts of things, and it's really quite interesting. You might have a lone stalker that wants to team up with you and fend off a mutant attack, or factions might initiate skirmishes based on territorial disputes, all without your intervention as a player. This is really interesting because it happens all around you and it makes the world so much more alive. The A-Life system doesn't only influence NPC behaviour, but it also helps with the game's ecology. Predators hunt prey, mutants roam in the wilderness, and anomalies appear and disappear as you go, so they're never in the same place, creating a constantly shifting landscape basically, and it's what makes the game so incredibly fun to replay over and over. Looking ahead to Stalker 2, A-Life is set to receive significant enhancements along the way. The developers promise a more enhanced and nuanced system that will bring the zone to life like never before. NPCs will have even more complex behaviour and interactions, with improved AI that can adapt to changing circumstances. Factions will have a deeper strategic goal and can influence the game's world in more meaningful ways without player intervention, leading to new alliances and conflicts depending on how you want the game to play out. Additionally, environmental factors such as dynamic weather and anomalies will dramatically affect the world now, making each playthrough a unique experience. And while we're on the topic of A-Life, we might as well talk about other things that are being implemented in Stalker 2 that can just hype you up a little bit and get you even more excited for the release. Firstly, and most obviously, is the graphical improvements from the original 3 games, and this was going to be on a whole nother level anyway, just from the time difference that the games were built in, but this game is built with Unreal Engine 5, which can provide stunning visuals without hindering performance to an unplayable level. Take one of the features of UE5, for example, Nanite. This basically creates intricate landscapes filled with absolutely millions of polygons in real time without compromising on any performance. This means that players can expect to traverse highly realistic settings and making the scenes that we have seen from previous trailers accurate to how users will see in the game, rather than just an overly polished trailer like some developers keep getting away with. Combining Nanite with the world partition system as yet another integration with Unreal Engine 5, it will automatically divide up the game's world into manageable loading sections and streaming only the necessary parts as players explore, which will reduce loading times and ensure seamless immersive experiences as you move through the zone. And immersion is the absolute key to these games working so well. They have an absolute edge among anyone else, I think, in creating immersive worlds, and I don't see it being any different in Stalker 2. The trailers show absolute immersion, and even in the graphic settings of Stalker 2, you have different options to make the game even more immersive, like turning off your HUD completely, so you have to manage your surroundings even more carefully. GSC Game World are placing a huge emphasis on player choice and consequence, building further from Call of Pripyat, aiming to create a truly personalized experience unlike anything we've seen before. Stalker 2 promises a more complex decision-making system, as mentioned earlier, where every choice can lead to a different outcome, impacting the story, character relationships, and the world itself. And it's all about how you want to play the game, and I think that's the main thing, right? They said themselves that there are going to be tons of interactions you can have where you can literally spend hundreds and hundreds of hours talking to various NPCs and getting different side quests, different interactions, and not all of them are going to be story driven. But what that does is create an immensely playable and replayable experience, which is what we are all looking for. And then you've got the post-launch support. Now, many people just focus when they're releasing a game on getting the game live and then thinking about post-launch content afterwards, but GSC Game World have got it in the bag already by already announcing 2 main things coming in the future after release. That's not including some free expansions and 2 story-related expansions as well that will be paid for. But this does include mod support, which means much like the mods that have been made for previous titles, thanks to the titles becoming vacant for so long and the files being released to the public, they are actually officially supporting mod support now, which means players will have the tools to create and share their own content, from like small tweaks and UI improvements to new missions and entirely new gameplay experiences, and empowering the community to develop with custom modifications. It's just going to improve various things. We'll talk about it more in a second, but just look at Stalker Anomaly. It has brought a completely new player base to the Stalker franchise, and I feel like mod support is just going to enhance the lifespan of Stalker 2 immensely. On top of that, they've also announced multiplayer support, which is on the horizon, which will be a free update that will be coming post-launch. This will allow players to either team up with friends or compete against each other, and I feel like that'd be really fun. I haven't played Stalker with friends, but I would sure as hell like to. So yeah, now I would like to talk about Stalker Anomaly as sort of a last point. This is basically, if you haven't heard of it, a community-based mod pack for the game released in recent years, which has brought a whole new wave of players to the franchise, but through different ways. Some people like it, some people don't. So it's completely fan-made and has been growing significantly over the years, drawing from the foundations of the original Stalker trilogy, and it has sort of pushed them all together in one free and easy to access download. But Sam, how did they get away with this? Most game devs will cease and desist and all that. Well, thanks to GSC dropping the Stalker project after Call of Pripyat for quite some time, all of the game files were released to the community, allowing them to make their own projects out of it, hence Anomaly, Gamma, all of these other mod packs that have come afterwards that have absolutely made the game so much better, with improved graphics, more weapons, more customization features, hardcore modes. All of these different things you can think of are available in mod packs. And I think the main thing with it is it's so easy to access. You've got all 3 games in one download, just on ModDB. It's so convenient, and it gets so many more people interested in the Stalker franchise. The only difference is it is a mod pack created by a community of players that have already played Stalker. So what it does do is provide a sandbox experience for players to explore, rather than giving you all of that deep, cohesive narrative that was the previous 3 games. So yes, you can turn on the missions, if you will, and do the missions, but it doesn't flow as well if you're playing Anomaly. You can just go here, there, and everywhere. You can fast travel on your PDA to the heart of Pripyat straight away if you wanted to. And that's completely up to you. You'll have a voice talking in your head the whole time, but it can happen because it's a mod pack and it's very sandboxy, allowing you to do whatever you want. Now, for those people that have just played Stalker Anomaly, Stalker 2 is going to be a lot different to what you guys have experienced. it's going to be a very structured narrative experience. So whilst the open world exploration and the go here, there and everywhere is going to be there, you're going to have a storyline as well and a bit more structure to what you've got to do. And I don't know whether people are going to like that or not, just have playing Anomaly. And I think that's where the divide between players are. You've got the people that have played the games from the get-go that only played Anomaly afterwards or have not touched Anomaly because they don't feel it's the true Stalker experience. And then you've got the complete flip side where it's only people that have played Anomaly. And I feel like that's one of the reasons I made this video, if you will, because we're getting everyone together. You know, true Stalker fans have already booked the days off work like I have and are ready to get going come the 20th of November. So we should all be ready together. And I hope this video sort of prepared you by giving you a little bit of hype on what's to come with Stalker 2 and the background of previous Stalker games if you needed it. Don't forget that this game is going to be available on Steam and Xbox Game Pass for both PC and Xbox. And if you are wondering what the gameplay is going to feel like, then just have a look at this image on screen. It shows you basically what you should be running at based on your computer specs. And if you've got an Xbox Series X, you can expect 2 modes where you can play in 30 or 60 FPS depending on the fidelity of the game, and then the Series S will run a consistent 35 FPS according to the devs. That may change on proper testing and on release, but who knows. Now this is the end of the video, so I'll say thank you so much for watching, but I will say don't forget to get subscribed. I've been waiting for this game for so long. There's going to be tons of content on the channel. If you haven't subscribed, it's definitely worth doing. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below in the comments how excited you are for Stalker 2's release, and let me know your thoughts of the video and all that fun stuff by leaving a like or a dislike. I'll see you in a week's time when we dive in to the world of Stalker 2. Bye bye.